We're going to move pretty quickly into the next panel because people have some time pressures. And I think, Tina, you're the one with the most pressing.
I do. Yes.
So
I'm the most pressing, but you want to start yours?
Well,
I mean,
give me
I
the
don't have to
clicker.
leave until a little after 5.
So let's do this. Obviously, I'm not Karen Philbrick, and Karen Philbrick develops about the most scripted and proctored
really?
thing that I've ever seen, except that when she left today, she took it with her. So you guys are kind of on your own, except for
I'm
me
not very
watching
good
the
at
clock.
scripted or proctored, so.
Tina, thank
So,
you.
Rusty?
Tina and I are one. We're one program. We're going to tag team on our project since now we have. We're bookends. We have an east and west, and so when we talk about leading the HSR transformation, I think it's a great place for us to talk about both those, and also highlight where we are. Most folks here are familiar with Brightline, and we're quickly but slowly but quickly transforming into Virgin Trains USA. We had the Florida project start out as Brightline. Richard Branson came in about a year or so ago, made a little investment, licensing and marketing agreement, and poof, we're Virgin Trains. If you go to Florida, you're still going to see Brightline trains running around. We're not going to change the look until next summer. But in our expansion project in out west, which I call Virgin Trains West, is definitely Virgin all the way. It's going to be that way from the beginning. And so we're real excited to bring you up to date on that and talk a little bit about why we think we are part of the transformation. So there's about 5 points that I want to make about why we think that we're on the cutting edge of and why we think cutting edge of not only the innovation of train travel, but also how you make something like this financially sustainable and for the long term. And the difference is what we're doing that maybe hasn't been done before is we're building something that has basically modern luxury and that has hospitality component to it. I was really pleased with the assistant administrator today when he called Brightline the most luxurious train he's seen since anything in Europe. And so that's what we think we have. And if you haven't been down there, you need to try it out for yourself. The other success component is reliable and frequent service, and we've heard that a million times today. Reliable and frequent service. That's how you get people out of their car and into the train, especially on the corridors that we call the too short to fly, too long to drive corridors, the city pairs. And so it's working for us. The previous panel mentioned 16, 17, 18. Somebody out here said departures a day. That's what we do, 17 departures a day. And so that's going to give me comfort that I can take the train 60 miles or 100 miles and do business or go to dinner or whatever and get home the same day or a meeting of that kind of a thing. Multimodal is very important, and we are multimodal. And with us, airport connectivity and TOD. So we're going to just roll right into this little update thing. Some of you may have seen this, but some of you may have not.
Our story begins in 1885 when American industrialist Henry Flagler, already well known for establishing Standard Oil alongside John D. Rockefeller, set his sights south and moved to Florida to pursue interests in real estate development. He would quickly become the driving force behind the growth and development of what is now the nation's third largest and most visited state. Fast forward to 2007, when all of Flagler's businesses, now collectively known as Florida East Coast Industries, FECI, were purchased by Fortress Investment Group. Given the growing congestion on Florida's major highways, especially I-95, it didn't take long for the team to recognize the opportunity to leverage existing rail infrastructure to connect Florida's cities with passenger rail. In 2018, after 3 years of construction, we opened Brightline, the nation's first privately funded high-speed passenger rail system. Our first route travels between Miami and West Palm Beach with a stop in Fort Lauderdale. Passenger rail, a transportation modality largely neglected for the last century, was suddenly revitalized in America. Contemporary cultural trends have made this new travel option all the more compelling. Increased demand for productivity while mobile, decreased demand for single vehicle ownership, the emergence of ride-sharing to get people to and from train stations, and the general trend towards safer, more eco-friendly, and experiential travel. By the end of 2018, we were carrying 100,000 passengers a month and had already become a critical component of the transportation network in South Florida. Our next step is expanding our Florida system to Orlando, with additional extensions planned for Disney World and Tampa. Our model has already proven successful in other markets where routes are too far to drive but too short to fly. where capture rates of the travel market average 20% and profit margins 50%. The second facet of our business model is the development of transit-oriented real estate. With the increasing urbanization of the U.S., people are seeking transit-oriented developments where they can live, work, play, and have access to great transportation. Our first planned expansion outside of Florida is Southern California to Las Vegas, a market which, like Florida, is a huge and congested route with 90 million visitors, 15 million residents, and over 50 million trips per year. Here we'll cut travel time from nearly 3 hours to just 90 minutes, all for less than the cost of gas and parking. Brightline, which will soon be known as Virgin Trains USA, is positioned as the most comfortable, reliable, fastest, cheapest, productive, and safest way to get people between highly populated cities that have congested corridors. We're positioned to transform regions and create connectivity between cities that was previously thought impossible.
So in the video, it mentions that's almost a year old, this video. So ridership, 100,000 a month. Our 2019 ridership so far is 106% higher than it was in 2018. And so we are ramping up the way we think we should be. Somebody asked me earlier today, are we making a profit yet? I said no, but we're certainly losing less money every month than we were the month before. And so I guess that's the way it's supposed to work. And I think we'll get there. I think we have the right formula. And we're in the right corridor because, as I've said many times, and people probably know this, Orlando is the most visited city in America. And so when you talk about that and then you talk about the capital of Latin America, it's a great place to prove the concept. And we are proving the concept right now. The other thing that makes us successful and very innovative is our multimodal plan model that we have in every station, Miami being the biggest, and where we're actually connecting not only with our commuter rail that's coming into our station, but the metro rail is right next door, and a downtown people mover that kind of loops around downtown Miami. And then we have a marketing agreement with Lyft. So Lyft drivers usually hang around near the station every time a train comes in, so you get a discount if you take Lyft, don't take Uber, because we get 68 cents for every ride, but or something like that. But so when you go into our stations, there's no worry about the last mile, because even downtown, a lot of towns are doing this now, these little golf carts that run around. So we're doing that in Miami now. And then the other thing is the Orlando station. Orlando Airport will be, when we roll into that airport, and they're building a brand new terminal in Orlando that's as big as the existing terminal, with 120 new gates, billions of dollars. The centerpiece of that new terminal is the intermodal terminal facility at Orlando Airport, which you're looking at. It's there, it's ready and waiting for us. Our offices are in there, our design team is in there, and we are beginning to build out the space of our station. But only airport in the nation where there's an intermodal terminal within within the airport footprint. There are others, obviously, the nearby JFK, Miami, you take a people mover a mile away to the rental car center, that kind of thing. But we're right in the middle of the brand new airport. The new airport's being built around us, and that'll house 4 train sets, Sunrail, Virgin Trains, a people mover between terminals, and a light rail to our tourist center. So a very important component to our project. This is the only place we can't do TOD. And TOD is the most important, the other most important part of this business plan, which has relatively not been done for quite some time, is the transit-oriented development around our station. The core station in Miami, the home port, is 250,000 square feet, but with 3 million square feet development around it. You saw the picture in the video, including apartments, office buildings, 20 restaurants inside the station. It's a very modern version of, I guess, Union Station. And I promise you that when our architects designed this, they didn't have Richard Branson in mind. It just kind of worked out that way, to have the V's everywhere. But it's worked out really, really nice for us. And it's a beautiful, beautiful facility inside, magnificent space. It's becoming an event space. Somebody had a wedding there not too long ago. And we do all kinds of things there. But what's really exciting, and time to segue.
Okay.
Time to segue is my colleague Tina just started with our company 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Formerly the Regional Transportation Commission Executive Director of Southern Nevada.
Nice.
We have her working on the Virgin West project, and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about that.
Okay, so let me tell you my story. So 30 years ago, I moved to Las Vegas. I never meant to stay, but that's a whole nother story, right? And I remember my first year while I'm living there, there's these concrete stanchions going up because you know what? A high-speed rail is coming, like big concrete bollards where the Japanese were coming. They were going to build a high-speed rail. A few years later, those things got torn down. A few years later, guess what? High-speed rail is coming. It's maglev. Maglev is coming, and our Senator Reid, was working really hard to secure money, and yeah, some of you are nodding your head because you've been around as long as I have, so you know this stuff. Guess what? That money went away. Then a few years later, guess what? High-speed rail is coming. This time what was actually Bombardier teamed with a local developer, and they were going to use Bombardier equipment. They were going to, there was another, but anyway, you get the point, right? High-speed rail is coming. Psych. So when we heard that high-speed rail was coming again from Brightline, I think our community, justifiably so, had a lot of
Yawning.
yeah, maybe some yawning and some like, are you kidding me? Not again. And you guys know that, right? You're in this industry. You know, we've talked this whole day has been about how challenging it is to move some of these big projects forward. So when I found out, again, I was with the transportation agency in Southern Nevada. So I went and did a field trip. We did a recon work to go take a look at this Brightline project that was in Miami. I took a small cadre of people with me, and we were blown away, absolutely blown away by this developer who seemed to understand that transit or high-speed rail isn't just about moving people or the transit component, it's about the real estate play as well. And now all of a sudden, when you can see that this guy gets how you marry these things together, you can see that maybe high-speed rail is coming this time. So I did a little more research on my own, learned about the financing stack, learned about the equity, learned about the owner's commitment to the project, and then it became Virgin. Once it became Virgin, all of a sudden, that got my community's attention. That's a brand, even when it is truly just a brand in this project, but it is a brand that that is very credible and exactly what this project needed. So I still, even though I've let my community know for a few months now that I was coming to work for the train, I retired, and now I'm here. Every single time I meet somebody, they say, "Is that train really coming?" So we still have a lot of work to do in Southern Nevada to help bring credibility to the project. But let me tell you about the status of the project. And I think sharing this with our community, I hope sharing it with you as well, brings a level of credibility to it. So it's 170 miles between Las Vegas and Victorville, which is in the high desert. It certainly is not within the LA basin, but this is a first phase. It will be on its own tracks. It will be in the existing I-15 right-of-way. All the environmental work has been done in the past, and now FRA is reevaluating the old ROD, and they hope they'll probably issue, what is it, finding of no significant, what is it?
Fonzie or?
But yeah.
Fonzie?
Fonzie, is that what it is on the ROD? So that should be issued by next year. We'll break ground last quarter of next year, so fourth quarter of 2020. The project has already spent about $250 million in terms of putting the teams together, doing the design, dusting off the ROD, doing all the environmental work. And they have actually got the construction team, they've got a pre-con team together that has taken it to 30%. So they're able to really finalize the cost. It is a $5 billion project, of which the state of California issued PABs that they'll be able to leverage for $3.2 billion. They're asking the state of Nevada for PABs as well to be able to leverage to $800 million. And then the rest will be with private equity, the owner himself, and then going out for investors. At any given time in Las Vegas, the visitors, at any given time in Las Vegas, 25% of all the visitors have come from Southern California. So 1 in 4 people who are in a hotel room in Las Vegas have come from California. So there's only 2 ways to get there, either through I-15 or by having flown there. I can tell you, we are operating, we're not going to get any more asphalt. There's no more asphalt that's coming between Las Vegas and LA. They're way too other. California's got way higher priorities as to where they would invest their infrastructure dollars. We are starting to approach our maximum capacity numbers at McCarran Airport. Our numbers are about 55 million is what, depends on the aircraft mix, but 55 million is the number that they use, and they have exceeded 43 million, I think. They're headed up to 43 million this year. So you can see that we're gonna be pumping up against a cap here soon. And then along I-15, we more than exceed the average daily trip capacity of I-15 along that corridor is about 36,000. On a Sunday, any given Sunday, once you have to check out of your hotel room and there's this mass exodus of people, we're seeing about 50. They're pushing through. They're trying to push through 50,000 in a day. So the congestion is absolutely ridiculous. It can go from a 3.5-hour trip to a 6-hour trip. And I'm always wondering, why do people come back? That is a problem, because you know what? That number is actually starting to plateau, and we're worried they're not coming back. So this project for us and our community, now that I think we can get our arms around the fact that it is real, is really exciting. And from what I understand, it will be the nation's very first true high-speed rail, and that it'll attain speeds of 180 miles per hour. I think the European standard says it's about 160 miles per hour now is the latest standard. So that's me.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. And Rusty, we appreciate you filling in sort of at the last moment
Yeah.
to help things
'Cause I
along.
gotta
And
go.
Tina, I know you've got to go. I know you've got to go. We thank you. Let's have a little hand for Tina.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Can I just say, I look forward to being a part of this industry. So my resume has got everything on it, from traffic management to buses to road construction to raising taxes, gas tax, all that stuff. I have no rail on my resume.
So we notice you're a private pilot. Are you flying home yourself? Or are you taking
When the project's done, we've offered Tina, because our work will be done, basically, we offered Tina's a job as behind the customer service counter to sell tickets, so you might find her there.
I'll pitch for you.
There you go.
Everybody, tickets for all.
Tina, thanks for coming.
Great. Thanks, guys.
For
Appreciate it.
folks who have been here before to any of these meetings, the lady to my left is well known to all of you. I'm going to truncate your long history in this. Say, started with Bob Clement, who was a leader in the House of Representatives on high-speed rail, Tennessee.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and then you went on to use Aquan for a while, and since then has moved her way up to through Amtrak to be the vice president of Northeast Corridor Service Line at Amtrak. And so let me just turn it over to you.
Thank you. And thanks. And I want to thank APTA for asking me to serve on the Virgin Rail panel today. It's really thrilling for me to be here, and really I know Rusty more from my trucking days, which I did take a little detour from rail into trucking, and I'm happy to be back at Amtrak and to meet Tina too. I've heard wonderful things about her, and so really and truly the point was, and Art and I talked about this yesterday. It's been a long day for everyone here, so we're sort of in the home stretch. I think we're the last thing between the happy hour, maybe the reception. So we'll maybe just stick to some highlights and then go to some questions. I mean, mainly my goal is to try to help close things on a high note. At Amtrak, we just closed out a record-breaking year. I'm the vice president of the Northeast Corridor Service Line. We had a record-breaking year in revenue and ridership on the corridor, and that's without adding any new capacity or certainly adding any new infrastructure. And it's a testament really to the fact that, to everything really that Rusty and Tina talk about, and as we look at really what's happening in terms of trends, the demand is there. The demand is there. Congestion, frustration, capacity on the interstates at airports. We're really at a point of global gridlock. And so, the future of rail is bright. And I didn't do a presentation, but I was very happy that our new trains are prominently featured on the literature. So if you look at this, these are in production right now. I was in Hornell just 2 weeks ago. The next generation of Acela train sets will begin entering service in May of 2021. So anyone that's followed the history of Amtrak and the Northeast Corridor, you would know that the Acela fleet that we operate today entered service in the early 2000s, and that equipment is reaching the end of its useful life. So we have partnered with Alstom, and they are assembling new trains in Hornell, New York. The first prototype has been fully coupled and is undergoing static testing right now. And prototype 1 will head out to Pueblo, Colorado in February. And prototype 2 will enter testing on the Northeast Corridor in April of next year, 2020. So things are happening. Sometimes I'd like to just slow it down a little, but we are really at full throttle. And it's very exciting because, again, in the Brightline equipment, it is beautiful. I haven't ridden on it. I have members of my team that have. They said it was an amazing experience. First of all, the customer service, the experience, top notch. And so I like to think that we're in an era where we can, there's opportunity for growth for so many entrants into this market, and we will all get better from competition and from learning from new entrants in the market. And so I like to think that Amtrak, we have truly turned a corner when it comes to the focus on the customer experience. For a long time, and many of you could probably attest to this, I think Amtrak was a very good train operator, and we focused on the trains and the equipment and the infrastructure, and not necessarily the people that were on the trains and what their expectations were and what that experience should be. That is not the case anymore, I promise you that, because every day we are tracking metrics, we are tracking our performance, and we are driven to deliver a better product. And whether it's in terms of the cleanliness of our trains, the courtesy of our service, the mobile functions of our app, the mobility, the digitalization that we know is really king to everyone. We have to do better, and we have been doing better. So when we begin to accept delivery of the new trains in 2021, really will be a game changer for us, because we know, again, Brightline, Virgin, new equipment, it makes a big difference. It's like anything, right? When you get on a Northeast regional train right now, many of you will be on an Amfleet 1 car that is approaching 50 years old in some instances. We need to modernize our equipment, and we are doing that. We are in a procurement as well to replace our Northeast regional fleet. So really within the next decade, the entire fleet of the Northeast Corridor will be replaced. And the last thing, because I want to really open it up for questions, is we also are 1 year away from opening a new train hall in New York City. Politico, I don't know if any of you read it, there was a big feature about the sort of the odyssey of New York Penn Station and where we find ourselves today. But construction is well underway. I'm there at least once a week. I can show you some pictures of what it looks like right now. And that's going to, again, saying this a lot, be a game changer for service at the nation's busiest transit hub, and certainly, again, experientially will be night and day from what again many of you have experienced in the subterranean labyrinth of Penn Station, as we have come to know and love it today. So again, it's I think all of us here that are proponents of train travel recognize the value that it brings. And again, Peter, I didn't say, I mean, his closing was in many respects how I would have led. There are just so many advantages, and all of us recognize that. We know that the investment needs are massive. I mean, that word doesn't even really do justice. But the future is bright. I'm very bullish about the future of Amtrak's Northeast Corridor. And as a Western Westerner. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I think it's very exciting that we're looking at service Vegas to Los Angeles, and who knows what's next for the Phoenix area. So with that, I'll stop, and we're that much
Yeah,
closer to
that's,
happy hour.
let me mention, thank you, Caroline. That was uplifting. That was encouraging. That was great. And for those of us that take your service up to New York, I always like to hear that,
Yep.
continuous process of improvement. That's terrific. I did want to make one point. Art Gazzetti made this point earlier, that this is the 6th annual policy forum we've had, and that next year is going to be, at this time of year, is going to be too close to a multi-day conference that we're having in Philadelphia in early 2021, which is time to coincide with the delivery and the rollout of your equipment that we've just been talking about. So make a note of that, everybody, and this is a save the date for you for Caroline's new equipment. Are there questions for Caroline and Rusty? Karen?
This is really for both of you. On the Northeast Corridor, Amtrak has a unique business model. You've got Acellas, and you got first class on the Acela, and then business class, and then you've got regional trains that have more intermediate stops. And so if you want to go between New York and Washington, you can sometimes decide whether you want to pay $89 or $350. Is that something that you would think about, Rusty, replicating for your service? Or is there any part of your service that follows any part of that?
I think
we were struggling with that issue on the study for Cascadia, where the assumption's always been it would just be Portland and downtown Seattle and Vancouver, and then we realized quickly that there were other places where these trains need to stop, but the point was made, not all the trains have to stop everywhere.
So great question, and actually as we we're running the same issue really. When we open up the service, we have the 3 stations in South Florida. They're each about a half an hour apart. They're the biggest cities in those 3 counties, but there are people in those counties that aren't being served, and that as we looked at it, we said there's some revenue opportunity there, and how do you decide to expand that way and not turn yourself into a commuter train and just remain inner city. More importantly, we are heading north to Orlando, which is a 180-mile extension, and we have decided in areas where we had no intention of stopping, small counties, some very small counties, that maybe we should stop there for various reasons. One is settle down, don't quit complaining, we'll give you a station. And so we're planning some additional stations north of West Palm Beach. First of all, we're planning 2 new stations in Phase 1, which is the Miami West Palm Station, and we are announcing they're in the public domain now. Actually, it's 3. It's very interesting. So if you know South Florida, I apologize, I didn't put a slide up of the map for the route. If you know South Florida, you have Miami, and then you go to Fort Lauderdale. Just about equidistant between those cities is a town called Aventura. They got a big mall there. It's a very wealthy community, North Miami-Dade County. So we decided to put a station in Aventura. It's sort of the no man's land between Miami Station and Fort Lauderdale. If I live there, I'm probably not going to take the train because I got to get in the car and go one way or the other. I've gone halfway to where I'm going, so I would keep driving. And then Boca Raton, also a very high affluent community, dead even equidistant between West Palm and Fort Lauderdale, no man's land. They're not really served by either station. It's too far to drive to get to the station, so we're going to plop a station there. Then we're going north, and we're going to put a station in an area we call the Treasure Coast, these small towns, Fort Pierce, Stuart, Vero, and near Cape Canaveral, a town called Cocoa. So the question is, how do we maintain our advertised 3-hour ride between Miami and Orlando, and so and stopping other places? So we are going to create a dual service. We're going to have a regional. Those smaller towns aren't going to get hourly service. They're going to get 2 or 4. We have to decide what the market is going to be there for those smaller stops, those fewer stops per day. We need a few more train sets to do that, but operationally we can do it. We have 5 more train sets on order in Sacramento, so we'll get them. But that's, and then the pricing is very dynamic. very dynamic, just like the airlines do, and I guess Amtrak
That's
does.
right. That's right.
And so prices are jumping all over the place depending on load factor and time of day, because we're noticing the pattern now. We've been in business a year, and we're seeing the pattern. We're getting more commuters than we thought that'll pay the price. They don't want to take the commuter line. We're getting a lot of tourists midday. We're getting a lot of lawyers going from courthouse to courthouse, and we're getting weekends are busiest. We are filling up trains on weekends more so than we are on weekdays, because leisure travelers are doing stuff, museums, concerts, plays, dinner, Miami Heat games, Marlins games, stuff like that. We're getting a lot of that. So dynamic pricing there, and we do reserved seating. And didn't I read that Amtrak's kind of looking to go into reserved seating?
Absolutely, yes. You know, we have gone to assigned seating in our first class cars, and starting in January, we'll roll that out into our business class. And on the new trains, we will also be offering assigned seating. It won't be probably the entire train, but a number of cars. So some will be open seating, others will be assigned. Because I'm sure, as many of you know, at sort of the origination city, you don't necessarily have a problem if you're traveling with a colleague or a family member, but if you're getting on in Baltimore, Philadelphia, or anywhere in between, it can be hard to find seats together, and so we want to alleviate that kind of stress. And also, we've been testing a nonstop train, so again, this is getting ready for the launch of our next generation of trains, when we will ultimately have more trains in the schedule. And to Rusty's point, and Karen, you see this in the difference between Acela, which is our premium product, and regional, which is really our economy line, is really testing different stopping patterns as well, and mixing things up, and looking also at different stopping patterns on the weekends. And that's really where we have been able to attract more riders. And what's really interesting on the Northeast Corridor is really where most of our growth is coming, is from the north end. It's between New York and Boston. We continue to have strong demand in the south end, but the north end is showing a lot of just organic growth, and that bodes well for us when we roll out the new trains.
Chris, a quick question. Actually, first an observation. Chris mentioned our two-day conference in April of 2021. I would just note that's the 50th anniversary of Amtrak, right around the time of that conference. So just a question: Brightline or Virgin Brightline will be crossing Amtrak's corridor on CSX. Any interest in interlining or
Well,
a
actually, we're
station
not
there?
until we do our Tampa extension, I don't think. I don't see where we get near CSX at all, heading north. Henry's
Well, between Cocoa and Orlando, you cross. No.
No, they're a little bit west.
All right.
They're a little
My
bit west.
Geography is
Actually, we're leaving Orlando Airport and heading toward a theme park that might be somewhere along the way, unnamed theme park. And so at that point, we are crossing CSX tracks, which actually now that segment's owned by the Sunrail, board. So but it is the CSX tracks, and we actually do plan to use a part of that track on our way to some theme park in Central Florida. Get on that track.
You have to pay a fee if you mention them.
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people were asking, why don't we use CSX tracks a long time ago, and when we were fighting some communities who didn't want trains. Go west where there's no people live, they would tell me. And I says, well, where the cows are. Somebody said, go west where the cows are. Well, we want to carry people, not cows. And so CSX quickly put out a statement, said, no, thank you, we don't want you on our railroad. We got Amtrak on our railroad. We have freight, we're done. So that was that.
Gotcha. I was going to say that it seemed to me that sign of the apocalypse when an ambulance chasing lawyer could do so by a high-speed train, but which was your other mention. Okay, back to our program. Who else has a question for our panel?
Chris.
Yep, Don?
So Caroline, the figures, the results on Amtrak ridership growth in the corridor, that is phenomenal. New trains are exciting. So do you see how that progress and optimism might help with the new tunnels you're going to need to get to New York?
Well, I would like to think that it certainly serves as, it validates that there is demand. I mean, certainly the sort of economic output of the Northeast Corridor, I mean, I'm not going to go through all of the numbers. I mean, we're well aware of how important train travel, how important Amtrak, how important all of the commuters that operate on our system, the economic activity around the Northeast Corridor. So, look, I mean, there's billions and billions of dollars of needs, and not just at the Hudson River. I mean, the Baltimore Tunnel, BMP, is in just as dire condition. And so, when I had my former hat on in the government affairs shop, and certainly the team now, working with some of the staffers that were up here before and others, I mean, continue to working with our partners and stakeholders to advocate for the funds necessary. But to your point, Don, I think absolutely, sort of more riders demonstrate that there is demand, and that demand is real, and that hopefully, policymakers will recognize that and continue to explore opportunities to provide additional funding.
If I could just, continuing on that theme, though, I mean, I sometimes wonder between Amtrak's always wanting to put a rosy face on things, and if you look at your website, it looks pretty rosy about all these things, and yet we have $36 billion worth of state of good repair needs on the corridor, and the Baltimore tunnels and the New York tunnels could fail any weekend or any day to some degree, and people often say the Baltimore tunnels are actually in worse shape than the Hudson River tunnels.
I just said that.
Yeah. So I just wonder if people are going to start riding all these new Acela trains and think that everything's cozy on the corridor.
It's a huge risk. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, of the things that I'm responsible for, in addition to bringing the new trains into service, is the daily P&L of the corridor. And if anything happens that will disrupt our service, our operations, huge hit, and so there's no doubt about that. And it is very real. It's very real. Our engineering team, again, they are monitoring it daily. In fact, in January, we're going to have extended weekend outages working on repairs in the tunnel. So I'm not putting a rosy face on that at all. I mean, I'm putting a rosy face on the fact that we know the demand is there, but it is fragile, doesn't even begin to explain the situation that we're facing, and everyone should be aware of that. All of the users, all of the commuter partners, all of the tenants that operate on the corridor. I mean, it is very real. So there's no other way, there's no spin to put on that. It's very real.
Paige?
In the Seattle area, the people that would benefit the most from having high-speed rail have been pushed out to cities like Tacoma or further, having 90-minute commutes into the cities just due to housing affordability. They also tend to be more middle-income or lower-income folks as well. So if we're looking at building a high-speed rail line, and you had mentioned having a ticket pricing model similar to the airlines, where as seats begin to sell off, the price goes up, how can we have a pricing model that sells tickets for $350 for a commute if these people that are needing to use it instead of driving are middle income earners?
Well, I don't know that that's a sort of apples to apples comparison. I mean, certainly on the Northeast Corridor, on Acela, our premium product, which is really fueled by the business traveler. I mean, it's basically the economic laws of supply and demand, right? So when you're in a different market, and again, sort of the pricing and revenue management algorithms are going to factor that in ultimately. So. I just think that there are, you're just going to find yourself with sort of different pricing models, but absolutely, I mean, at the end of the day, if you price the market out of, really sort of considering that option, then you're going to be running empty trains, right?
Well, where we are, I think we're in a kind of a unique, we're lucky because parallel to us, to our train, is another set of tracks, the CSX tracks, that runs a commuter service. And so people in South Florida have a choice. They can take our Tri-Rail commuter line or the Bright Line. There are people who, and I think the Tri-Rail is $6, $5, something like that, where we maybe 10 to 15 for coach and more in first class. And so, but there are people who will not get on the commuter rail for whatever reason. One, the location of the commuter rail. Two, they don't want to ride on the commuter rail. And three, they can afford to ride the Bright Line, right? And so that is the consumer choice. And it's working well for us. And what's really interesting is when we started this project, people said, well, you're going to be competing with Tri-Rail, aren't you? And we thought about that, and Tri-Rail initially thought about that too, came to us and said, you know, this might be competition, but they quickly realized actually we can complement each other. And that's why we, together, that authority and our company, aggressively worked together to redesign our station in Miami, a $60 million change order to add 2 tracks to our station so that Tri-Rail could come into downtown. Tri-Rail has never come into downtown Miami in 25 years. Imagine a commuter rail that doesn't go to downtown. But they never did. And so we connected through a Tiger grant our tracks north of the station that were only a mile apart anyway. And every other Tri-Rail train now comes to downtown Miami, so into our station. And I think it's going to be, as soon as we get the PTC fixed, it'll be going next year. And so I think it's going to be a big boost in ridership for them. But we have a certain market that we appeal to. So I think it's going to work.
And similarly, of course, on the Northeast Corridor, you know, we have commuter rail operators that are serving that specific commuter market, and then we're the intercity operator. So again, that's a good way to segment the market.
We have time for one more question, and then we're going to call it a day, unless there isn't one more question.
Well, I will make one comment because I didn't mention this in my remarks, but thank you for mentioning that it's really May 1st, 2021, when Amtrak will celebrate its 50th year in operation, or since its creation by Congress. And it all, again, just very conveniently sort of corresponds with the launch of our new trains, which will be a real milestone for the company. So we have a lot, again, sort of a lot that we are moving and advancing to get ready for that year. But to the extent that there will be this the event in Philadelphia, it certainly will be a good opportunity to celebrate that.
Well, I think we've ended the day on a very good note. Both messages of optimism and hearing from the FRA, a message of optimism right before you, too. This was a kind of a chewy day. I think it's been one of our better policy fora, actually. And there's a lot to digest. And I think it's probably incumbent upon the APTA staff and the leadership of this committee, Art and David and others, to get together and figure out. We heard a challenge from the Hill, you know, which is get it together, get up here quick. We may have a hearing, or we may just start writing. So we do have a challenge, Art, about how we're going to do that. And so we'll be calling on you and David and Ward McCarriger, who was here earlier, but made himself scarce, probably because he knew what my closing comments were. But with that, I thank you all for coming. And unless there are any administrative comments that David or Art have, we're adjourned. Thanks.